Hey there, this is Al, the Doo-Wop. It's so good to be with you this afternoon. It's just been a great day. And right now, today we're going to be just talking about, I know you heard of them, but I'm going to tell you a little about them. This is Frankie Lymon and the Teenagers. Tell you, Frankie Lymon was quite a character. So this is about Frankie Lymon, and it's not a good story with him. You know, he was a young man and everything when he started out, and but he was into music even when he was small all the way through his career. He was real young, but he was real young at the time with his mother and his father. You know, they sung in a gospel group that was called Harlemers. Because they were born in Harlem. That's where they originated from, Harlem. So, and Frankie and his brother, they were called Junior Harmoniers. So he was into music even back, and he was no more than about 10 years old at the time. And then he had almost like a follower even back in those days because his voice was he had a tenor voice, but he could just seem like he could regulate it, you know, to the low pitches and the high pitches. That's what made him sort of like a different type of vocal. His voice was just a little different than most of them there at that time. And you got to realize one thing, he was very young. He met with a reporter one time, 11 years old, and he told him, said, you know, the life I'm living is just like a grown person because I have just about started doing it all. And so I am pretty well, I feel like I am not 11, and feel like I am now 18 or 20 years old. And so that's the way he was. He was that kind of a guy. So, you know, they started out and we got together and in high school. I think it was Sitz Junior High in Harlem. That's where Harlem, New York. That is where they originated from. And they started singing and, you know, having quite a bit of followers at the time. They were doing quite well. They was doing good. And but he was about 14 years old at the time. So you know, at the time they were really integrated. They were really integrated. They were three African Americans, and there was two Puerto Ricans. That was the group they were at the time, and they grew up together in Harlem. They knew each other, and they was real close friends, and so they were doing well and everything. But they were singing one day, and anyway, they got to be heard by a record company, and as he was in it, and they put him in for audition. And when they auditioned him, they brought him in, and all of them, and both of them met for this audition. So when this audition come, it was this guy, a Puerto Rican guy. His name was Santiago. But Santiago was really going to be the leader and of the Teenagers. But guess what? He didn't show up. He was late. So when he was late, that's the time Frankie took his place. And Frankie took his place, and they had the song that they got from the girlfriends that kept writing poems and all of this stuff. They kept writing these poems, and so the guys, one guy is, let's say, his name was Merchant, I think, and Santiago. They the one that really wrote Why Do Fools Fall in Love? Years ago it came out that Frankie Lymon wrote that song. No, he didn't write that song. He didn't write it. No. What happened is that when he didn't show up at the time, that's the time when Frankie started the lead sing vocals. So he took over. Bam. That's when it come Frankie Lymon and the Teenagers. So when they all got, after they made this, Why Fools Fall in Love just went, pew. Okay, we got a problem now. We got a problem. Because right then, Frankie didn't supposed to be the leader, so, and the lead vocalist. So now we got a problem. So there was a fight, there was a problem, there was everything else. But the guy that discovered him was called Golden. And so there was a big problem and everything else with Frankie and the group. And Frankie, having young, foolish, and everything else, Frankie started with drugs. So at 15, I just met 15 years old, he was addicted to heroin at 15. So when he was there, at that time, Frankie had big problems to a point where Golan said, "No, this ain't gonna work too much with you. You got to get it together." So he did go to rehab, and he got himself pretty well straightened out and everything like that. So when he got himself straightened out, he still was having a big problem. He had a problem with his cohorts that he was working with, his members and everything else. It was a problem because Frankie, when he started singing, he was about 14 years old. Got to remember that. So what happened is that there was so much confusion. Golden said, "I tell you what, I want to let you go to solo." So that's another fight went out because he come out of the Teenagers, and then they made him, put him in to sing solo. That didn't work at all. The reason why it didn't work, Frank's voice, now you gotta remember he's real young, and right at the time, his voice started changing. You know how our voice, when we young, our voice is different and everything, but Frankie's voice, it started changing to a more masculine voice than when he's singing "Why the Fools Fall in Love." So it just didn't work too well with him. And so that, I believe, to be my personal feelings on this. This is my personal feeling. That Frankie, then he went back, unfortunately, on drugs again. Okay, and when he went on drugs again, then the record companies just kind of like dropped him. It just didn't bother with him anymore. So Frankie was then he was about 18 years old at that time. That's bad than you being 18. What you were doing and what I was doing. We were just having a good time right there. Not Frankie. Frankie right now was dating older women. He didn't bother with the young girls. He didn't bother them. It's older women. And in fact, the older woman that he was dating, I ain't got no name on her, but introduced him to heroin. So that put him in that addiction. So he really had a big problem. So when he got back on heroin, he just couldn't handle it anymore. And you got to figure that when Frank went back on heroin, he wasn't about 20 years old. Frank had already went through 3 wives, okay? And he went through one of the wives was Lola Berry. If you remember the Platters, she was the girl that was in Platter. I'm estimating by my figure, she was about 8, 9, no, she's more than that. She's about 10 years older than Frankie. So that's the kind of women Frankie liked. And so Frankie got to a problem, and the drugs he really took over on him. Yeah, he did took over on him. And so what happened to Frankie? Frankie went back on drugs, but they didn't say whether Frankie died from drugs or not at 25. That's 25 years old. And so, but anyway, he was found in his grandmother's bathroom, dead. So, this is really a sad of a young boy. I say young boy, I'm not going to say a man. Young boy that had all his life, all from 13 to 25. He died at 25. So this is just give you a little about Frankie Lymon and the Teenager. But I want you to understand, I'm going to be telling you more about Frankie Lymon and the Teenagers because there's so much to talk to about. So what I'm going to do is that we're going to have a part 1, and then we're going to get another one. We're going to create part 2. Because Frankie got a history, even though it was short, but he got a long story to be told, about his life from all his 3 wives and all of the drugs, all of the life about him, how he lost all his money. When he died, he was in bankrupt. He didn't have nothing. And I'm going to tell you all about that. I'm going to tell you how he lost all of that money that he's making on this, because Frankie Lymon Teenagers they was one of the biggest at the time in the 50s that you want to see. They were great. And their rates was up. So they was in Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. So, well, I'm going to get back with you on Frankie Lymon because there's a lot more. So we're going to part 2 on that, okay? Well, have a good night.